Gregg Jarrett, author of, well, the number one book on Amazon for the last week. Poor Judge Pirro got mad at me because she, last week, was number one on the New York Times list, and I love Judge Pirro, and I love you, and you guys have been battling it out for this week's position of number one, which is a good thing from my perspective for two of my friends.
Well, the book's doing very well, thanks to you, and, you've supported it all along, so I'm very grateful. But, it was very interesting. The judge today once again spanked the prosecutors, Robert Mueller's prosecutorial team of partisans. They were, once again today, trying to smear Manafort by describing and showing photos of his lavish lifestyle. They tried to introduce a photograph of Manafort's closet where he's got a lot of expensive
No.
clothes.
He had an ostrich coat that cost $15,000.
So the judge told him, essentially...
Oh, wait a minute, but he is guilty in one sense. He's guilty of really bad taste.
Oh, God, ostrich coat? Like, who would wear that?
Yeah, who would wear that?
Yeah, that's a felony right there. But the judge told Mueller's team, knock it off. He repeated once again, it's not a crime to have a lot of money. We don't convict people just because they're wealthy. And, it's clear that prosecutors may be short on facts and long on smear photos and smear evidence. And the judge will have none of it. And it was interesting, not only is the judge told these guys, don't mention Russia, don't mention collusion, don't mention Trump or the campaign, because that's inflammatory and utterly irrelevant. This has nothing to do with Trump and collusion. This is a tax fraud case, a bank fraud case. You know how much time you usually get for something like that? Maybe a year and a half behind bars. But Mueller wants to send Manafort behind bars for 305 years, which just underscores how unscrupulous and unprincipled Mueller is. And there's a serious question about the legitimacy of this case, as you point out. This didn't arise from Mueller's investigation, which is what he's only authorized to bring. This is an old case dug out of the tax division of the DOJ, which declined to prosecute Manafort 8 years ago for lack of evidence.
Let me go. You've been following this, and you're going to be our eyes and ears on the case every day because you're watching and listening to every minute of this. And so tell us what else is going on, because yesterday seemed to go very fast. The jurors were picked, opening arguments were made, the first witness was up testifying. Tell us what's going on and bring us in the courtroom.
Well, this is the so-called rocket docket, and, that means that the case comes to trial quickly, and it generally moves along, and it is going at a very fast pace. Opening statements were not that long, and then they, started presenting a lot of the evidence. And, the judge is in a hurry. He keeps prompting Mueller's team, would you please present the evidence of tax and bank fraud and stop showing photographs and talking about, how rich Manafort was. Again, that's really irrelevant. Mueller's team tries to say, but, Your Honor, we have to show motive why he would cheat on his taxes and bank fraud. The truth of the matter is, motive is not needed to prove the case. You can actually prove a tax and bank fraud case just on paper alone. The defense claim is Manafort's not the one who was funneling money to these foreign accounts. It was Rick Gates, his partner, who has cut a deal with prosecutors to flip against Manafort in exchange for leniency. And in my experience, people who do that have a tendency to lie to save themselves.
Well, to me, it's like they're offering a bribe to the witness. Now, hear me out, and we discussed this yesterday, and some people on the left apparently didn't like my characterization, but I used a high-profile case of Sammy the Bull Gravano, who prosecutors could prove they thought that he had committed 19 murders. And Sammy the Bull didn't go to jail for those 19 murders because they used Sammy the Bull to go for a bigger fish. The bigger fish in that particular case was John Gotti Jr., known then as the Teflon Don. Mm-hmm. And then not only did he not spend any time in jail for the 19 murders. Then he got in a witness protection program, and he got a new house out in Arizona. Now, to me, if I'm facing the rest of my life in jail, and Manafort may be, there is an incentive to say whatever they want you to say, isn't there?
Absolutely. Overzealous prosecutors who care more about gaining a conviction than upholding the rule of law and justice have been known time and again to suborn perjury from witnesses, pressuring them to lie about someone else in order to bring charges against that other person. Here, the other person is arguably Trump. But that you're absolutely right, and I'm glad you used the word, Sean, bribery. That's exactly what it is.
Well, aren't they getting something in exchange for something? I mean, and we'll give you this if you do this. And don't some people
do on cross-examination?
How much credibility, though? If I'm being, let's say it's Sammy the Bull. Let's use that example. And Sammy the Bull doesn't want to go to jail for the murders that he can go to jail for. He's going to basically say whatever he needs to say. Now, even though in that particular case there was a witness that contradicted him, they still used him. Now, we know today that the lead prosecutor for Mueller in this case announced that he might not decide to call a star witness to testify. Now, this is getting interesting. And it was a pretty shocking admission. Federal prosecutor saying Rick Gates may not testify in the trial of Paul Manafort. Because what the Manafort team is saying, well, he controlled the money. He did this, and you guys cut some deal with him. What's the deal they cut with him?
Right. Well, I mean, it's a shrewd move by Kevin Downing and the defense team here because on cross-examination, a snitch like Rick Gates is always vulnerable. One of the tactics I used to use was, you've lied in the past, haven't you? And snitches always lie, and you have the proof that they've lied. And so they have to say yes. And so then you pose the ultimate question, well, you know, when you were lying to these people, were you also lying to prosecutors, and are you lying now in front of the jurors? And it puts the witness in an impossible situation. And
why but there is a conviction rate. The odds are not good for Paul Manafort. We've got to be clear, right? What is the conviction rate in federal court?
Oh, it's like 95%. I mean, it's very high. The feds, generally don't like to try a case unless they can absolutely win it. But, here it's a little bit different. Mueller never thought he'd actually have to prosecute a case. I think he thought that Gates flipped, so we'll get Manafort to flip and we'll implicate Trump. And when Manafort didn't do that, probably because he has nothing to say, and he may be a principled guy who will not lie the way Mueller probably wants him to, Mueller was forced to actually try the case. There's a reason why the tax division at DOJ never brought a case 8 years ago, because they didn't have good enough evidence to convince a jury beyond reasonable doubt, so they didn't bring the case. So that tells me that, this is the same case, and Mueller may not have as strong a case as it may look in the indictment.
Well, I don't understand the law, so maybe you can help me. I mean, if he's doing business with Ukraine and he has, I guess, foreign business accounts to do business in other countries, it's not something I've ever done, so I don't have any personal first-hand knowledge with, but I'm assuming you have the equivalent of a business LLC or a corporation in another country and bank accounts in that country, correct?
Yeah, of course.
And then you put the money in those bank accounts, and I would assume, based on what these charges are, that you're responsible for the taxes.
Yeah, generally speaking, you are. And you have to file as a registered foreign agent, working for a foreign company, which he didn't do. But that's generally a civil penalty. And many of these, tax evasion cases are also civil penalties. To prove a crime instead of a civil penalty, Mueller has to show intent and knowledge. So if the defense here is, wait a minute, I didn't know I was breaking tax laws. I relied on other individuals to advise me. And the guy who was managing these foreign accounts was my partner, Rick Gates, and I trusted him. All right, so you can't get a conviction based on knowledge and intent.
Mm-hmm. Well, I got to take a break here. We'll come back. And as we continue, Gregg Jarrett is with us. This is not the biggest case. Why is the media trying to make a 2005 tax case on a guy that worked for the president less than 100 days into the trial of the century? And you know about the trial of the century. You covered O.J. from Los Angeles every day at the time.
That's right. Well, the media is desperate for anything that is even something that isn't connected to collusion and Donald Trump. And, this is the nearest thing, Sean, that they've got to it. It has nothing whatsoever to do with Trump or collusion, but the media is trying to spin it that way. He's being prosecuted, Paul Manafort, for simply being connected to Donald Trump. But if you're connected to Hillary Clinton, you get a free pass, get out of jail free card, you get immunity. Look at all the 5 people that were surrounding Hillary and got immunity in exchange for nothing. Tony Podesta, who is one of the partners of Paul Manafort, he's not being prosecuted because he's a friend of Hill and Bill.
What about Tony Podesta and what Mueller did today, recommending, I guess he's throwing that up to the Southern District of New York. What's going on there?
Well, we just don't know yet, and it'll be interesting to see, what happens. It had been reported earlier that Podesta was being granted immunity, but we don't really know that for sure. And now we're... The only one that gets immunity is forget it, but you get my point. I mean, yeah.
If I'm sitting on a jury and they're telling me, well, did you get a deal to say what you're saying? I'm not thinking you're very credible, but apparently it works all the time. I guess I'm the exception.
Well, and especially when Mueller has just now learned that Manafort is going to blame Rick Gates, the snitch, for everything. So they may have reconsidered and decided, you know what, we're going to have to make this case without Gates.
Can't the defense call Gates?
They could, and in fact, he's on their witness list.
All right, Gregg Jarrett, congrats on the book and the Russia hoax, and thanks for being with us.